Matters with Paul Rosen.
Our diets, our Western diets in America are just really, you just don't realize how poor they really are.
What would you say to others who would like to feel better?
Sometimes you need to find the instruction. That's where the testing and everything comes in, because without that knowledge, there's no way I could have got to the point where I'm at today.
Straight talk about health.
And then I start preaching and telling them what I've been doing. And this guy named Paul Rosen has changed my life.
With your host, Paul Rosen.
By the way, the information contained in this program is not approved by the FDA, nor intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any medical condition or disease as defined by Western medicine. However, skilled practitioners of many disciplines have found nutrition response testing to be a highly reliable supportive technology for assessing the health and fitness of the body's functional system.
Well, Paul Rosen, if you had 350,000 pounds of toxic chemicals lying around, what would you do with them? Well, according to Environment Oregon, a watchdog group, one Portland company, which shall remain unnamed, dumped 350,000 pounds of toxic chemicals into the Willamette River in 2012.
That's not shocking to me.
Well, it's shocking to me, but it's not good news. It also goes to show how our water is polluted, and that's one of our topics this morning on Health Matters with Paul Rosen.
You know, one of the biggest surprises, I think, to many people is that things like food labels, things like reports from the Water Bureau contain all the information that's, well, fit to be contained. And nothing could be farther from the truth. These things are legally mandated. Mandated meaning they have to occur. Food labels, for example. If you think that everything on a food label is actually everything there is in the food, then you're making a big mistake. If you think when you get that report from the Water Bureau that everything in your water is included in that report, you're making a big mistake. Huge mistake. That's really important to understand, because it is the federal government in both cases that is forcing free enterprise to do something. And free enterprise, God bless their little hearts, are not wont to provide information that would allow you to fully understand what their product is or what the water quality is. Because if you did, you'd freak out.
Really, it's that bad? If
you did, you'd freak out. Did you know that the EPA has not changed the water standards, has not included the brand new chemicals being emitted by, various actors for over 20 years? Over 20 years.
So are you talking about toxic pollutants that are going into the water?
Correct.
And these
I'm talking about all kinds of chemicals.
And these are
all
not
chemicals. This is another misunderstanding. All chemicals created in a laboratory are toxic pollutants. That includes fractionated vitamins. They're all toxic pollutants.
But fair enough. But why aren't these things?
Not all of them create the conditions that might manifest cancer, but it disrupt your endocrine system, your thyroid, your ovaries, your prostate, your pancreas, your thymus, your adrenal glands, right? Just that alone is enough to make an individual completely miserable.
Okay, so let's take this in order. We can get to the many bad effects we have on our health from these pollutants, but why aren't so many of them being reported properly?
I mean, it's left to our great, politicians and presidents and their whim.
Okay, so
in order to instruct these organizations like the EPA or FDA to do what they're supposed to do, and all of that, if you're asking me, of course, is affected by the one and only green machine.
So it always has to do with money.
Always.
I get that. Can we accept then, as a matter of course, that the water we're imbibing every day from whatever source has contaminants in it?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely can.
That's bad
You
news.
can count on it. You can count on it. Now, there isn't an organization that I do support, so I'll say that on the front side. Environmental Working Group that has done quite a bit to expose these conditions, these issues, including our topic today about water pollution. And you can go to ewg.org, and they have a link to a whole database wherein they did some independent examination of thousands of water supplies across the country. You can type in your zip code and then choose your city and see what contaminants turned up in the tap water.
So there are certain major sources of water pollutants. Is that correct?
There are certain
major sources. For example, and I know you're going to get to this, but let's just
planes,
say
trains, automobiles.
There you go. There's that. There's industrial waste. There's agricultural runoff.
That's actually the largest, if you
I believe that. And in fact, I happen to know that, believe it or not, Paul. And, our Portland water comes from the Bull Run watershed, which is about 30 miles east of town. And as you said many times, because we have a lot of agricultural activity in the state of Oregon, we may be especially susceptible to pesticides, herbicides, the runoff from those toxic chemicals getting into our water supply.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be concerned about that. But again, there are also industrial sources, and sadly enough, our own sewage may be leaping, or I should say, seeping into our water supply.
Well, the amazing thing is that they find pharmaceuticals in wildlife, all the way in the forests.
And
hither and yon.
So we can assume then that the wildlife are drinking the water that's polluted, and
we're polluting the water. So the more prescription medications you take, the more toxic your water in general becomes.
So there's another source right there. If you're taking medications, I mean, do those medications somehow end up in the water supply? Is this people tossing their medications into
That's another vector.
The water?
Yes. When they're done with their meds, instead of recycling them, in a responsible way, they just flush them down the toilet.
Okay, so here are multiple sources of toxic pollutants going into our water.
The two, just to be very practical and to relate to our situation here in Portland, for example, the two contaminants that are tested above the health guidelines are arsenic and trihalomethanes.
What is that second one? What is that exactly?
Trihalomethane?
It's
a chemical compound.
Okay.
Yeah. And other contaminants that were detected, which don't have a limit, I believe, right, are barium, chlorate, chromium, hexavalent chromium. Anybody remember that movie?
No, I don't remember the chromium movie.
With hexavalent chromium?
No. I must have missed that one.
You as a science...
Julia
Roberts.
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts portrayed... I can't remember her
Was
name.
it the Pelican Brief?
No.
It wasn't the Pelican Brief.
No.
I'm guessing it wasn't Pretty Woman.
I will.
It was Erin Brockovich.
Thank you.
There you go. She was the activist.
You knew it all along, and
I did. She was the activist who helped expose
hexavalent chromium.
There you go.
Yeah.
That was the second title of the movie. But they thought, let's just go with Erin Brockovich.
I was just so focused on my science.
Okay. All right. But we've had a number of cases.
Can't expect a 71-year-old brain to, be able to handle two things.
You said
two
that.
Things at once.
So we've had a number of incidents over the years, such as that case where industrial polluters have been caught red-handed dumping things into the ground and into the water supply.
And imagine all of the polluters that aren't caught. Imagine. I mean, just think about it. human nature, et cetera, et cetera. Just think about it. Right. Okay, fine. So let's say we have, lots of, industry around a particular area. Then put in the sale of the product, filtration systems for the residents that could be affected by these things. Just include it in the price of the whatever it is you're selling. But no. We have to figure it out. We have to find out, and then taxpayers pick up the tab.
Well, let me ask you this then, along those lines. Are we at a point with our water being contaminated? Is it to such an extent that water filtration is pretty much necessary in our homes? Is that something we should be doing?
You're jumping ahead, but the straight answer is absolutely, positively,
yes.
yes.
You brought up the point. Let's say you buy a new home or a new property of any sort, your new condo or renting a new apartment. Maybe water filtration should be part of your payments every month.
How much trihalomethanes do you want to consume?
I would say that would be zero.
Yeah. Exactly.
If I can't pronounce it, I don't want to
How
drink
much
it.
chlorate do you want to consume? Just doesn't sound good. It isn't good. But you know what other contaminant that the Environmental Working Group, and I happen to agree with them, fluoride. Fortunately, around Portland, people have been really, really resistant and smartly resistant to allowing the fools to slip fluoride into our water.
But absent even that, aren't there other preservatives put in drinking water or other chemicals meant to avoid chemical contamination, such as chlorine? Do we have chlorine in our drinking water?
Yes. Now, of course, nobody wants to be. Most everybody knows that we have, pathogens that are included in water, parasites and bacteria and virus and whatnot, and so that needs to be handled. But there are other ways of handling that. Yes, they're more expensive, but they're certainly not ways that elevate the toxicity of the water itself.
In other ways, do you mean these are things we can do as individuals?
Ammonia and chlorine are absolutely known to cause negative health effects.
But if they're
without
in the water,
doubt.
if they're in the drinking water as a matter of course, if those are being put in there as precautions, it's on us as consumers, right, to protect ourselves.
From that.
Yes.
That's where the filtration would come in. But get to your representatives and say, hey, there are other ways. Yes, they're more expensive, but they're also more effective, and they do not put our health at risk for other conditions, like bladder cancer in the case of chlorine.
Well, that's horrifying that chlorine can do that.
Yeah.
So
and the big problem, of course, is when it comes to the heated water, like in a bathtub or a shower, you're just consuming scads of it.
You mean heating the water brings out
a hot shower.
Okay.
It vaporizes. The chemicals vaporize, and you breathe them right up into your brain.
Sure you do, and you also spread them around the house even, quite possibly.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many people I've helped who have experienced various types of functional illnesses that people find vexing, like migraines or like any kind of thyroid dysfunction or liver, conditions or adrenal conditions. Or oh my gosh, the list is endless where chlorine or fluoride was an issue.
And again, jumping ahead, I know you're going to get to this. There are precautions we can take in our homes. You aren't necessarily doomed to having to get bottled water even to bathe in. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, but you do have to spend a few pennies to get a decent water filtration system.
So we do have to think about awareness, and I guess that's what this program is all about this morning. Think about what's in your water and what you can do to make yourself safe and to make your water safe.
Oftentimes we rationalize that just a little bit of something probably isn't all that dangerous. But the problem is that the body becomes overwhelmed and a little becomes a lot relatively quickly. And you wouldn't know how to connect the contamination with the conditions that you're finding, because oftentimes they won't show up in a blood test or a urine test. Because if they do show up in a blood test or a urine test, like too much lead, you're in deep doo-doo.
Right. And as you just indicated, you may have symptoms and you can't identify the source of those symptoms. And you may not know that you're actually making yourself worse every day because you're using tainted water every day. Yeah,
nitrites and nitrates specifically from fertilizers that in the atmosphere turn into nitrites. But they contaminate the water supply. I mean, there are swaths of the Midwest that are constantly having to dig down deeper and deeper to get a water supply that isn't completely contaminated by the fertilizers. And in some cases, they can't even find it.
That's pretty bad. You know, when I lived in Southern Oregon for a while a few years ago, the drinking water there was noticeably bad. You could detect a kind of silty taste when you drank the water down there. So that was a big agricultural area too. So I'm sure that had everything to do with it.
And the good news is that there are some very good filtration equipment that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, to be able to utilize. And if you can't afford the most effective, right, there are still some things out there that you can do to reduce exposure to things like chlorine, for example.
So that's the good news. We can take these,
or the amines in ammonia, because that's what's poured into the water.
Okay, so
chlorine.
we can take these very proactive measures to make our water safer. That's the good thing.
The chemical that was used, I'm sorry I interrupted, but I just had a thought. The chemicals used in World War II, World War I, chlorine gas of various sorts to kill millions of people, we're pouring right into, not that particular chemical, but chlorine, right into our water supply.
Is there any way of knowing, Paul, if we're exhibiting certain ill symptoms, if that's coming from the water supply? How do we?
Well, there is if you utilize a practitioner like myself or somebody like me.
Okay, so you can help identify the source of
those
problems.
If you have any health issue, no matter what it is, right, that is related to a functional abnormality, then why not come and find out what might be the root cause?